10 billion people on Earth by 2080, wasting more than 40% of our food, wars and conflicts decreasing people's ability to produce food, more than 800 million people going hungry every single day, spending billions of dollars struggling to feed people, climate change reducing crop output by over 30%, topsoil eroding at extremely fast rates, crop diseases causing billions of dollars of losses annually. Overall, it's a bleak outlook. But instead of sitting here and developing crippling anxiety, why don't we work towards a solution? Let's roll. Let's take a look at the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's one of the most resource-rich countries in the world, with gold and cobalt reserves being extremely abundant across the country's southeast. It has more than 80 million hectares of arable land, which is enough to feed all of Africa if properly cultivated. They have one of the world's largest populations, with over 95 million people calling the DRC home. With all of these positive factors going for it, it's hard to imagine why it's ranked 175th in HDI and why 5.4 million people are struggling to survive on the brink of famine. Why is it this way? Like most places in the world, the reason the country has such a lack of access to basic services is due to the decades of conflict that have plagued the nation. The Congo crisis in 1960 was a byproduct of decolonization and a proxy of the Cold War. It started a long chain of civil conflict in the nation that continues to this day, especially in the Kivu, Kasai, and Tanganyika provinces. UN peacekeepers have been deployed in the Congo since the 1960s, and despite having some success at reforming government and bringing peace to some parts of the country, major rebel activity continues to this day. Conflicts between army and rebel groups have flared up in recent months, leading to further refugees streaming into the country. Without stability, farmers aren't encouraged to take risk by planting fields, causing little internal food production and a reliance on expensive, imported food. The internal refugee crisis has also played a huge role in food distribution in the country. There are currently more than 5 million people internally displaced, along with refugees streaming in from neighboring countries, including the Central African Republic and South Sudan. Major aid organizations like the World Food Program and USAID are on the ground delivering food and shelter to the most vulnerable, but they're being overwhelmed with the sheer amount of people coming through. In their most recent report, the WFP noted that they were facing a shortage of supplies and that the funding necessary to sustain their operations in the country over the next 6 months is over $200 million. Even if you're a farmer in a relatively stable region of the DRC, growing adequate food is next to impossible. About 70% of the nation relies on sustenance farming, in other words, growing crops like cassava and peanuts to feed themselves. But to get enough food to feed their families, they require farming basics such as high-quality seeds and fertilizer. These products are prohibitively expensive to buy out of pocket, and getting a loan is near impossible. Most banks refuse to give loans as there's a lack of diversification, and if a drought occurs, there's very little chance that any of the farmers are able to pay them back. Returns are often suboptimal regardless, so there's very little incentivization to open new credit, and the IMF warns that most microfinance institutions are at risk of shutting down. Overall, it's a tough nut to crack. Any solution implemented on the ground would have to contend with a variety of different risk factors, and would be generally reliant on stability, which is impossible to guarantee. But this sparked a thought. What if we looked outwards instead of building something on the ground? More than 80% of the nation's food is imported, and if we could somehow lower the cost of imported goods, millions of people now have access to food. This solution is especially enticing because its effects are almost immediate. No long training times for farmers, and no potential production loss in the case of war. The benefit of such a solution is simple. If we produce more food, especially in a time of extreme demand, the additional production serves to alleviate globally elevated prices, allowing countries to import more food. But how do we put this in action? One of the DRC's largest food imports is corn, the largest producer of which is the United States. It makes sense to work here. There's more funding to implement potential solutions, and impact is maximized by working in the largest producing market. Now the question becomes, how do we optimize corn production in the United States? After doing some digging, one of the largest contributors to production loss in corn in the United States is disease. Currently, 6 to 10% of total corn yield is lost due to disease, a large part of which could be prevented if disease diagnosis took place early enough to warn farmers of a potential risk. Most genetic modification and field optimization up to this point has been focused on improving yields and increasing resistance to pests and weeds, which is why disease continues to play such a large role in yield loss. As the world population grows and productive arable land continues to decline, we need to be much more efficient with the land we already have. Crop disease is an inefficiency that we cannot continue to tolerate. Farmers currently diagnose crop disease through inspecting their fields, whether themselves or through seasonal farmhands. This is both expensive and time-consuming, but this investment pays dividends for the season's crop output. By monitoring fields early into the growth and reproductive phase, disease is detected and dealt with before it becomes an existential threat to the crop. While this method is effective at getting a general sense of what is going on in a field, it's difficult to quantify just how much a field is infected and what treatment might be necessary. Fungicide and herbicide are not cheap to apply, and full spraying fields has negative economic consequences for farmers. My question now is, how do we find effective ways of pinpoint identification of disease, allowing farmers to diagnose and treat them early and effectively? A pretty obvious solution to this seems to be a solution involving computer vision and mechatronics. Machine learning has been playing an increasingly important role in modern farming techniques, from facilitating self-driving tractors to berry-picking arms. Computer vision architectures based on convolutional neural networks are highly adapted to disease identification and segmentation, especially with the ample amount of in-field image data that's waiting to be collected. I've trained a model to roughly 91% accuracy across 3 diseases and healthy corn, across a set of roughly 4,000 images. Papers show that this efficacy can be improved to nearly 100% with deeper architectures and access to more training data. As for the physical implementation, most imaging has taken place using drones overflying fields, which pass off geotagged image data. This method has been proven effective, however, limited flight times could pose a challenge to scaling their use among commercial farmers. Another potential physical implementation is a ground-based wheeled vehicle, similar to what the team at Mineral AI is building, except adapted to corn. Such a solution would also have to feature a telescopic arm to ensure access to every part of the plant, but would also have a significantly longer battery life than most drones. Regardless of the physical details, both solutions would be automated to function with little to no human intervention, eliminating another source of stress in farmers' lives. All they have to do is look at a map, see where the affected areas of their field are, and make a treatment decision. I think that leveraging technology in agriculture has the potential to completely disrupt the way that we produce food, from invasive diseases to problems arising from manual labor, just to name a few. Innovation in the field is especially important as we have to feed a growing world population with less arable land to do so. For me, this was an effective root cause analysis and problem-solving exercise. Implementing a solution halfway around the world could have a tremendous impact on the people living with the constant threat of famine. This type of analytical approach has been extremely helpful in framing ways to solve problems, especially when dealing with a multitude of different factors that could make or break the efficacy of a solution. I hope this breakdown has been both informational and helpful. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a comment down below. It would be much appreciated. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.